Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is a couple that's gone through a divorce. They're on the podcast together. My friends Jeremy and Sara Kerrigan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
Jeremy shared his story about 2 years ago in episode 761, coming out as gay to his wife, his journey to understand his sexual orientation. He's a convert to the church. He's a chiropractor. And about a year ago, this couple was divorced. They have 5 kids. Their oldest son is on a mission in the Michigan area, and they have 4 other kids. So their parents of 5. I heard them speak at Gather last April. They came on the stage together in 2 chairs to be next to each other and shared their story of how they tried to manage going through divorce and co-parenting and still being friends. And I've never quite been moved like that to see a couple gone through a divorce up there on the stage together, at times holding hands. Their body language to each other was very affirming and supportive. I could tell this couple really loved each other and cared for each other, and has navigated a really difficult chapter of going through a divorce. We're not inviting anybody to go through a divorce in this podcast, but that's the reality for straight couples, for a couple in a mixed orientation marriage. Jeremy's gay, Sara's straight. And so this podcast, we just said a prayer together that might help you if you're going through a divorce, even if it's just a straight, not just a straight marriage, but a straight marriage. Really good people go through divorces, whether it's a mixed orientation marriage or a straight marriage. And then a lot of us around marriages like that, I've been guilty of taking sides and wanting to find a villain. And maybe that's to protect my own story. But really good couples go through divorce, and it's not my job to try to figure out the backstory and who's the hero and who's the villain. My job is just try to love people and support people and do what I can to support everybody. So if you're around people who are going through a divorce, maybe hearing Jeremy and Sara's story will help you better love and support somebody that's going through a divorce and still doing their very best to co-parent and support their kids and navigate that. And so we don't have a lot of podcasts in this space. We have just a couple. And I asked Jeremy and Sara after I heard them in Gather, I said, would you willing to become on the podcast? And they said they would. Sara teaches. So she's, I believe, in the high school system teaching. And so we're doing this in the summer, which is just slightly less busy for them. But being parents of 5 kids, they're still really busy. So we're doing this during their lunch break, and Jeremy's chiropractic office. That's still not the right word. But anyway, that's my 3-minute introduction, and we'll turn it over to Jeremy and Sara to share their story.
Well, thanks for having us on. I just had this memory pop up of when I was on last time. I accidentally announced that we were getting divorced. Like, I hadn't told some people, and when the podcast episode came out, I was like, "Oh, we should talk to some people." And so it's kind of fun to come back.
Well, after I
Full
listened to
circle.
it.
Yeah, after she listened to it, was like, "Oh, you said this," and I was like, "Oh, yes, I did say that." It's been an interesting journey. We actually found out our divorce was final last February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day, and
Wow.
so we went out on Valentine's Day. Still care about each other, and we went to a couple events, and people were like, "Oh, how are you guys?" We're like, "Well, we're divorced." And then of all the things that night, we actually ran into our marriage therapist that we saw for a couple of years. And so I, of course, because I
Wife
like
is
to make jokes, I told his wife, "Yeah, we used to see your husband as counselors, but he's not very good. We got divorced, you know." And yeah, those are all my jokes. That we'll get him out of the system early, I think. So, but I really liked your introduction. I was thinking a lot as you were sharing that about how the language around divorce puts connotations there, you know, and there are a lot of situations where divorce is the right choice for couples, you know, and just words like, "Oh, you have a failed marriage," or "you divorced her," or "you divorced him," or "you left," you know, like all of these different words we use. And maybe sometimes they're applicable, but I've thought a lot about our marriage. And even though we're not married, I feel like we had a very successful marriage. You know, we have 5 beautiful kids. We've done a lot of wonderful things and are still doing a lot of wonderful things together. supporting each other as we both try to date 40-year-old men, complicated spots. So, yeah, maybe I'll turn over to Sarah and just let her give a little bit of backstory of us and how we got here. And
Was trying to figure out how much backstory to give since you already did this and talked a little bit about how it went down, how you came out, how we handled it at first. I think what has made the most difference is when he came out, that wasn't one of the options we were looking at first. We weren't thinking about getting divorced, but as time went on and his mental health was struggling so much still, it had to be put on the table. It had to be something we considered, which we never really had considered divorce in the 20, almost 20 years we've been married. That was just not something we thought about. We planned to work it out, whatever it was. We cared enough about each other that it was worth it. But when we started putting it on the table, I remember how hard it was, but at the same time, feeling myself kind of soft launching it a little bit when I talked to family or friends, talking about, well, we don't know if we're going to stay married, but we need you to know if we don't, that that's not a failure, that that's just a choice that we might arrive at. We just haven't figured out how to handle it yet. We needed to figure out what was going to work best for each of us and our children. And for Jeremy, it was became obvious that he needed to be able to really figure out who he was and explore that without worrying about hurting me while being married. We talked about lots of different
we're
options, but
building up resentment
yeah,
towards each other or anything.
right. Like we could have stayed married and we could have done okay with it, but I think there would have been resentment built up over time. Um,
We had communication issues on and off. I mean, from our dating age, we met each other at 18 and 19. And so we didn't have communication skills. And she developed a lot, went off to college and stuff. And we worked on it, but just hiding something so big from Sarah for so long created like d- uh, a wall, if you will. And so coming out, we actually started getting along better than we had in quite a few years. We were more connected, more on the same page, more supportive, more able to listen to each other's struggles and challenges,
a
and
lot less friction,
a lot less
less
friction.
defensiveness.
I feel like for us in the journey, like she said, we had to put um, getting divorced on the table is when I when I'm coming out, and she's loving and accepting me, and we started realizing there were so few things that we knew for sure, especially within like LDS doctrine on gay and other places. It was just like we don't know a lot of things, and so as we're trying to make a decision, we can't just say we have to do this because this principle. We needed to be able to consider all the options, and we really did. We put every option we could think of on the table, some not seriously, some that wouldn't have worked for us. People are like, oh, you can just stay married and have an open relationship, and we're like, no, that's not
That's
us.
where the resentment was
you
gonna.
know and so we had, but we looked at it. Made sure that we were not just not coming at it with any preconceived notions as much as we could.
And not limiting ourselves to any specific box because there's not that many boxes around what we're doing. We've talked so much about there's no manual for this, for navigating ending a relationship, but not because we both knew we didn't want to end our relationship. We were friends first, and our relationship has been built on friendship. And because we're such good friends, I think is how we were able to make a marriage work for 20 years, even with him being completely closeted from everyone, even himself.
Sure. So often when we would share with people, and I'd open up and be like, "Oh, I trust you. I want to let you in that to know that I'm gay." People had responses of like, "Well, if of course you're going to stay together because you made a commitment to each other and you're going to honor that commitment, that covenant." And then others were like, "Well, of course you're going to get divorced. You're going to be able to live your most authentic life now and all this sort of stuff." And I just remember thinking, "There's no of course in any of this situation. There's no easy, oh yeah, here's the easy button, we'll just do this and it'll work." And it yeah, it created a lot of introspection, a lot of questions of what's most important to us. And one of the things that really stuck into my mind was we make a covenant when we get married to be there to support each other, to love and care about each other. And I started this chain of thought of like, well, I can still do that even divorced. Just because we get divorced doesn't mean we have to hate each other now. And I know there's situations, and as we say all this is our journey. There's certain big things that didn't happen in our relationship that if had happened would have changed the story. Betrayal, mistrust, other
Yeah,
things.
cheating or just a pattern of being unkind to each other would have maybe not made this possible.
Right.
But he's never ever mistreated me or been unkind to me on purpose, and hopefully vice versa. And that is what's really set the foundation for being able to have a good relationship after and still support each other and trust each other.
And I like the phrase you used at one point. She said when we were trying to when we decided to get married and we're trying to figure out what that looked like, what do we do with kids? What do we do with our lives? Her phrasing was we wanted to make it as not traumatic as possible
It's
for
untraumatic.
everyone. Untraumatic. There we go. For everyone involved, ourselves and the kids included. And that took some, I don't know, creativity, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, but we really set that intention. The two main intentions I think we set when we went into it is we wanted to maintain our relationship as much as we could because we knew that that would be best for the kids and best for ourselves if we could continue to love and support each other, because life is hard. To be thrown into it at this age without the support of a partner in some form is pretty rough. And I think we realized we didn't have to do it that way. We didn't have to completely separate. Ending our romantic relationship and the marriage relationship was not the same as ending our relationship. And the other intention was, like you said, to make it as untraumatic as possible. Every decision we made, we thought about what is going to be hardest on the kids or on us, not what is going to be fair, what it looks like 50-50. All of that was maybe makes the most sense and might have been nice for us, but it wasn't going to be best for our kids. They were already used to being with me most of the time since I had stayed home with them mostly. Um, what was it? One of our younger kids said after we got divorced.
Oh, I said, "How are you doing with all of this?" And he's like, "Nothing's really changed. You're over all the time anyways." Because the way we structured it for us was that she has the house and the kids stayed with her. We didn't really want them to have like two different places to live, back and forth. Plus, the current economy, it's kind of hard to have two different households. But we wanted it to be pretty consistent. And they have dogs and they have very sets. They have a nice pool, in Arizona when it's 147 degrees like today. It was nice to have that base. And for my journey, because I was thinking a lot about this in preparation, is, people are like, well, you came out, you just get to be you now. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I had decades of messaging that being me was wrong, and it's not like a switch that I just flipped the switch and suddenly I'm like, yeah, I'm totally cool. I'm great. Like there's so much to go through. And in many ways, I kind of needed space to do that,
But also support.
but also support. And so I moved out, got a small apartment. And I'm over often. I'm checking in the kids, making sure we talk most every day, just checking in on each other. We support each other in dating escapades, things like that, trying to figure out all of the details. And then, if she has work or she's out of town, I'll come stay with the kids. And if I'm gone,
Or check in a lot. We've got teenagers too, so they're
yeah, last weekend I had two of them stay home and they really were excited to be home alone. So actually kind of just I was gonna go spend a lot of time with them, but I was like, I think they'd prefer to just have this quiet time. I think that's one of the things as parents, we try to tune into what do our kids need, what kind of support. And it's really easy when you're going through a divorce. And I've seen this often where we become kind of selfish, and it's about you're going through something big, it tends to draw you into yourself. And sometimes we forget about the other people, the collateral, damage, if you will. And so we've tried to focus hard on how can we help the kids. We had them each go to therapy, things like that. But kind of thankfully, most of our kids, other than occasions, they really haven't struggled with the divorce itself. They've
not too much. I mean, I'm sure it's been hard. I'm sure it's been a big life change for them, but I hope that there's also value in seeing us continue to love and support each other and how accepting we can be of each other. And it's just one of our kids actually didn't realize our divorce was final until about 3 months later. She, whatever, whichever
child.
child it was, was like, what? I didn't even know that. Like, well, that's because nothing changed when it was. It was just us continuing to do our best to support and love each other and be a family without spending all our time together and still both pursuing our own lives, but in conjunction, I guess.
Um,
You were asking about how people can support couples that are divorcing. And that's really hard because, again, just like listening to our kids, I think you have to listen to whoever it is you're trying to support, right? If you have to read the room, kind of, if they're upset at their spouse and the divorce is happening because of, abuse or really big problems that have gone unresolved or something, they might need you to pick sides. And that's hard. But I think in our case, we've had a harder time with people trying to pick sides and us not wanting them to. Sometimes I've even felt like I can't talk about the hard parts of it with people that are close to me because I'm still protecting Jeremy and I don't want them to think badly of him because it's nothing that he's ever done on purpose that's causing the pain, if that makes sense.
Oh,
that is one of the big things is there's a lot of grief and loss in it, but it's not necessarily I someone recently, well, not too recently, but I was struggling and overwhelmed with some of the grief of life, and they were just like, mm, well, if it's all this negative emotion, why are you sad? Like why? Not why are you
You just
sad?
did hashtags on an audio only
I did
podcast.
hashtags. Sorry, I forgot.
Negative emotions,
Negative
hashtag.
emotions in quotes, but like, uh, why don't you make a different choice? I think sometimes when life is hard, we think, well, it's because of the choices we're making. And it's like, no, there's just a natural grief process that goes with not just the divorce, in my case, coming out, loss of some friends and family and support. Not I have a lot of people that were great, but there were people that were like, well, we can't be your friend anymore. We can't associate with you if you're making this
Choosing
choice.
to love that side of yourself.
Yeah, and that so you have those grief and loss, and then I've actually had some health issues too during the journey, and so just navigating all of those. I was talking to a friend yesterday. One of the big things when you want to support someone is they don't really need advice. Like Sarah and I are pretty smart people. Like we know a lot of answers, and so people would come and like, "Well, just do this and just do this." I'm like, I just kind of need you to listen right now, listen and love. I think that's like the name of the podcast, right? So, and I was sharing with someone yesterday. I'm like, really, at this point, it's just that. Like, you can make some suggestions here or there, but I saw this done really well, kind of on accident. I was at a restaurant several months ago, and this mother and son were there. He was about 20, and she was, my age, maybe a little older, and they were just having lunch together, and he could tell he was really excited to talk to her. He was just sharing everything going on in life. He lives out on his own, has roommates, and he was like, yeah, we're kind of looking for another roommate. And the way she gave advice, she's like, actually, I know someone, you should call this guy, like he would be great, if. And then like she just put that out, she's like, hey, this might be a great idea. If you want his info, let me know. Just very like she gave advice, but she totally left it in his court.
Wasn't
She brought
prickly.
it up once more because she was like, the more I think about it, it might be a great fit. But again, let me know. And you could tell that like she was cool either way. She was okay whether he took her advice or not. And I stopped them like as they were kind of about to leave. I was like, hey, can I say something? Like, this is beautiful. Like this is what a parent son or parent child relationship should be when your kids are grown up or when you're two adults. If they're specifically asking your advice, that's different, but for most people, just listen and just show the love and support there. And like she said, people that whether they're intentionally or just like their brains are used to picking sides. Our brains are used to like, well, the marriage ended, who did something, what happened. And so we naturally get curious, we want to make sense of it. And so I think some people have just subconsciously picked sides or and it's kind of easy to blame me, I feel like, in a lot of situations, and people have said, well, he abandoned his family or these things like about me. And it's like, you don't know my situation. You don't know how often I'm there for the kids and how some many ways my journey of coming out and getting divorced wasn't to be there for my family because the
That's true.
the juxtaposition of trying to make it all make sense and trying to hold myself together and trying to be straight when I wasn't straight and trying to do all of that was
And worrying
crushing me.
about what would happen if he came out and that was causing you a lot of like shame. And
Right.
it impacted his relationship with our kids, especially the older ones, quite a bit because he was more anxious all the time. He was less, I don't know, you were just, like you said, you held yourself so tightly. and you were always worried about like what they were doing wrong, maybe just because that was all you could kind of reach for, it's like trying to help them, but not having any positive ways to help them because he didn't have much positivity in himself.
I describe it like I took on all of these obligations. Like some of them I took from church, some of them I took from like growing up from society of like, this is what a man should be. This is what I should be, and trying to hold all that together. Um, for decades just was breaking me, and I think in those phases when you're trying to be a certain thing, that's where a lot of times people are judging. You see this with really like homophobic people that turn out to be closeted, you know, that they're very anti-gay, anti-LGBT, all of this sort of stuff, and then it comes out that they're like having same-sex relationships secretly on Grinder and stuff, and it's like that internalized homophobia causes us to then judge other people. And I say homophobia, but it could be anything we're trying to hold together and
Or
beat
that we
ourselves
hate
up
ourselves,
for.
hate about ourselves. We're more likely to
Right.
be critical of in other people too.
So I was very like wound tight because I was like, I was trying to hold myself here. And so I got really easily flustered and upset. And
And
I,
you felt like you had to control everything that you could, I feel like, because it felt
because
like
I
it might all
had
fall
no
apart at any
control.
minute.
That pseudo, or what do they call it? Oh, there's a word for it.
I don't know.
The illusion of control.
Wow.
We really have no control in life. We can just do our best. But I had this illusion that I could try to control things because I was trying to control something that I couldn't control. And that journey, it was really interesting for me. Is like the journey of accepting myself. Um, Made it harder to accept situations where I wasn't accepted. But like Sarah said, there was still, even after I was like, oh, I'm okay to be gay, there was still a lot of anxiety about, well, what would people think? What will they treat me different? Will they There's a song that says it's from Dear Evan Hansen. It's not about being gay, but he's like, will they hate me too? Like if they see this behind the curtain. And so I had to come out pretty publicly for my own self to know for sure that people wouldn't just leave. And
Some
then
did.
some did, and that was a whole different process. But as hard as my life is currently with different challenges and struggles, I don't carry that shame. I don't carry this guilt of like, I'm a terrible, terrible person, like that I did for years. I just talked a lot. I was elders quorum president, Sunday school president, a lot of different things. And often was really focused on how much God loved us. And I believed that like God loves us, but like in my head, he hated this portion of me. And I consistently was trying to repent of my, like gay thoughts, and trying to fix myself. And it was so interesting as
But
I
you didn't even really think of them as gay thoughts. I don't think you just thought of them as sin, as shortfallings, right? That you were trying
right
to not be whatever that was.
my yeah, I thought of it as something I needed to repent of, versus just part of life. It was interesting. I was talking with someone recently about, we talk a lot about like, and this is a big side note, but like pornography or alcohol or something. And I feel like there's an assumption that if you look at pornography once, you're an addict sometimes, or if you drink alcohol once, you're an alcoholic, with people that don't do those or trying not to do those. And it was like, oh, like sometimes things happen and it doesn't mean we're this awful, terrible person. Like stuff happens. And it's kind of a side tangent. I don't know if that makes sense, but to be able to like my journey of coming out and accepting myself, which I talked more on that last episode, but it was so interesting how much peace I felt when I stopped doing things that I did to beat myself up. Things like taking the sacrament or going to the temple. I was always trying to fix myself there. And instead of using them as a tool to find peace and to grow, they became kind of like a stick that I beat myself with. And I felt, in my journey, like there were so many times where like, oh, I should do this again. I should, the should word. I should. And there were so many times where I would think that, and then I would feel this peace of like, you're okay where you're at. And the more that happened, the more I started to say, okay, maybe I am okay. And I can set down some of these expectations and focus in on trusting myself and trusting that uh, if I was divinely made, that I'm not broken just the way I am. And that's been again a very interesting journey, and also interesting to then one of the coolest things about it is how it extends to other people. When I start to look at other people's situations, I have a lot more love and empathy. I've always been a loving, kind person, but just to understand their journeys, I always used to try to make sense. I've had women friends who struggled, with the church because they felt like they weren't valued, like there was some of that misogyny and stuff. And before I was like, well, no, and this, and I had thoughts on it, while I was still loving and supporting. And now I can just sit and listen and be like, I see why your experience was that way. And I have empathy for you.
That's true. I had a thought, but now I'm not sure what. I was thinking about, I mean, we sound right now like we have a lot of it together. Our relationship is good. We're
Sorry.
just wanted to
Well,
make sure that we throw that out the window because we don't have it all together. We do love and support each other. It doesn't mean it's easy all the time. Sometimes it's hard and we're talking about stuff and feelings come up on both sides and not even towards each other, but just grief in general comes out at the moments you don't expect it. But it was not easy just because I feel like we did it a good way. It was still extremely hard and there was still so much grief, so much crying, so much working through stuff.
some anger and
Yeah, all of the stages or the circular pieces of grief, came out pretty constantly. I think I might have mentioned this before, but I remember kind of early in the journey when we had decided to get divorced. And what we just, it wasn't like we're going to get divorced, let's start it. We decided to get divorced and gave ourselves about a year to get to that point. And part of that was me needing, I said, I need time. And we just kind of took it slow. We had that intention. We started like planning what it would look like. We didn't actually file for divorce for about 8 months after we had decided that we were going to get divorced. And that helped just having that time to kind of work through it without it actually happening to kind of what's that book read, some of conscious uncoupling or something, and
mm,
I read a couple books about codependency, and that was really helpful, and trying to figure out in my head where does codependency end and when is just being a loving kind person, right? Because there's a lot of overlap there. But that was really useful, and just I prayed really hard to learn to love Jeremy and not be in love with Jeremy because I knew that that was going to be one of the harder parts for me. Um, and I prayed. This was a funny prayer that I remember praying a few times. Is I wanted to be able to grieve gently, but also to become stronger a lot faster. And those two things are not compatible. It was pretty tumultuous for a while, but I was really blessed to not, excuse me, to not have a lot of anger. And I almost never had anger towards him. um, Even though he kept saying, it's normal if you do, it's okay if you do, and it's okay for me to hear about it. He encouraged me to talk about it with him, even if he knew it would be hard for him to hear. But I was really blessed to not have much of that because I could see, and he had always, like I said, been kind. He had always been my friend. He had always been on my side, and that wasn't changing. And so that was really important. But yeah, just because we're seem to be doing pretty well, at least in our relationship with each other, doesn't mean it was easy to get there. And I remember like each month thinking back and like, wow, I feel like I'm doing better than I was a month ago. And like that gave me a lot of hope to look forward in the future and to see how it could continually get better and wouldn't just always hurt. Keep
one of
talking.
the things in there that she talked about was like, I feel like as we're both kind of people that want to just understand. We're very curious. We want details, things like that. And so as we went through the journey, we were really trying to understand and not find someone to blame, and I think that really helps. We weren't trying to, when we had anger, we tried to direct it to places that could handle it, like towards God and trying to
Sometimes, yeah.
in prayers, and then others of like, well, this is what I was taught, and kind of versus like this person taught me and I'm angry at them versus like this is what society was
Mhm.
teaching and feeling angry at those concepts versus at each other so we could still have that
Or
support.
even at other people. I was just kind of trying to let the anger be more at our situation and not at, yeah, at each other.
Yeah, being frustrated that we were in this complicated, which is the word we used all the time, complicated, situation, but not necessarily at again at each other. And I think what she hit on of like, I feel like this when I've listened to podcasts, I'm like, wow, that person's life's going great. What am I doing wrong? Because sometimes we get the highlight reel. And but just as a little thing, last year I moved out in January. February our divorce was final. In March, I got a pretty severe concussion. in April, her house flooded and had to like go through insurance claims and remediation. In May, our son was in a bad car accident. Thankfully, he
Wow.
was okay, but her car was completely totaled. In June, they had to move out of their house for 2 weeks so they could do all these renovations. July, our son left on a mission. August, lightning struck the tree next to her house,
Wow.
threw a branch into the house. And then in September, she and my daughter were in a car accident, totaling another one of our cars. Like, so, and I'm sure there was stuff in October, November, December,
We
but it's
stopped
kind of
counting.
all a blur. But there was like something major every month. And I have to remind myself of that often, of like, on the days where I'm really struggling, which is fairly common, honestly. There's just a lot of parts of the journey that are complicated and painful and lots of grief. I spent many years not crying because men don't cry, and I would push it down. And so I'm making up for lost time. I cry a lot, but there's things that need to come out. And I try to remind myself, like, any one of these things, a divorce takes time to work through. Coming out at 40 takes time to work through. All of the other
Everything breaking
stuff,
takes
everything breaking, and then to do
kids
them all at the
getting older and moving out is a big deal. Like if it
yeah.
wasn't at the same time as all of this, it would still be hard.
Yeah, sending our son on a mission in the midst of all that chaos and our daughter off to college. There's just so much that we're dealing with that I try to remind myself. I'm not very good at believing myself, but I'm like, just be patient. This is a longer process,
Give yourself grace.
give yourself lots of grace. So I say that to myself, but to anyone listening to, when we're going through these journeys, we want it to like wrap up and be really neat and a pretty little bow quickly, but the truth is life is pretty messy.
And I think, especially in the church, we have the tendency to, if things aren't going well, to try to say, well, I made the wrong decision. If things are going poorly, or like, well, what am I doing that's sin? And sure, some of that could come in if people are not feeling close to God or not trying to feel close to God or doing things that push them away. It can make it harder, but just because things are hard doesn't mean that you did something wrong. Sometimes things are just hard. And you can choose to try to deal with them by yourself, or you can get support from friends, from family, from God, from yourself, like the grace, and just the encouragement you can give yourself. But blaming yourself doesn't usually help.
It's interesting because if you're, I'll say, quote, righteous and bad things happen, it's just God testing you. But if you're unrighteous or you're doing something that people perceive as unrighteous and bad things, then you're being punished. Like we have all these associations we go through, and it's just like good and bad things just happen. And the other part of that is like, uh, I feel like in religious settings in the LDS church, but also in other religions, like we associate negative emotions with evil or Satan and positive ones with God. And so there's even been people who are like, well, this gay stuff kind of makes me uncomfortable. So they pull away. And I'm like, well, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. Like,
It's just uncomfortable because you're not
yeah,
used to it. And society and even the church has said that it's not okay. So we think that those feelings are the spirit saying no, but like you have to be careful of that. And I mean, if you're thinking that that's it, sure, pray about it, ask. But I don't think that, yeah, I think that we need to be more deliberate in figuring out which things are good and bad for us sometimes than just assuming from the feelings we have.
I think with that, like a lot of our journey has been uncomfortable, but both of us have had little things along the way of peace that said, oh, this isn't wrong. It's just uncomfortable and hard. And we're facing things that I swept under the rug and hid away for a long time. So of course it's going to be uncomfortable to look in the very messy underneath the rug with dead bugs and all sorts of stuff. But I related a lot like to, and I think I might have talked about this last time I was on the podcast, the backpack example or the purse, that a woman carries around a purse or a guy or a backpack for a long time. And that's you doing so much with it, or a diaper bag when we had kids, the small kids, and at some point you have to take that bag and just like dump it out
That's what
and
you
say
do.
like, what in here is trash? What helped me for a while, but I don't need anymore. Like if it's a diaper bag, do I really need diapers when my kid's 7? Like certain things that we purge, and then other things we're like, oh, this is something I really still need to keep. And so I feel like
I've
life
actually been
we kind
looking for
of
that. It's good that I looked around to find it.
right. I feel like in life, it's good to do that with sometimes our beliefs, sometimes our where we're at. It's interesting. At one point, one of the criticisms, someone said, "Well, I can't. I can't be around you. Your values are changing. And I like stopped. I said, my values aren't changing. I still value all the same things. My beliefs are changing. My beliefs are shifting, and I'm realigning myself with new beliefs, but I'm still sticking with my values. I still value what Sarah and I've created, our family. We still consider each other family. What our titles are is complicated. We're not husband and wife. We're best friends, but that doesn't always seem adequate. And so, like, but we're still just family, and I value that. I value honesty. I value authenticity. All these things that haven't changed, but my beliefs around what that looks like have. And that's harder for other people, but it's also, again, more freeing and less shame inducing for me.
It's funny, we were just talking about the other day. um, in some ways, like we said, this has strengthened our relationship in a lot of ways, actually, because you look at someone you're married to, and hopefully you can trust and expect them to always be there. But at the back of that structure of marriage, there's always the option that that's going to end and you won't have that anymore, right? Because a parent-child relationship can't really be severed, but a marriage relationship certainly can. I feel like we've moved, it sounds funny, but beyond that, in that what we have now after what we've been through, I can't think of almost anything that would sever the relationship we have now. Like,
Mm.
we're going to be there for each other. It might not be as close sometimes, or it might be closer sometimes, just depending. But like, Jeremy's a constant in my life. I know that he's always going to care about us and support us and be there for whatever I really need. And that's a pretty big blessing, actually. It's also funny that our relationship is so open now because he kept such a huge secret for so long that there doesn't seem to be anything that, like, we would try to
Mm.
keep from each other. It wouldn't make any sense at this point.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, how much do you want to know? Like, how much detail do you want? But there's not any reason for us to not be completely truthful with each other unless we're just trying to not add more to the other's plate, but it's not like hiding stuff. And that's an interesting thing I have been thinking about lately, how it's not it's not just a best friend. It's not like a sibling, but it's like it's there now. Like, he's not going
Right.
anywhere.
Yeah. That's great points. I love that. I was gonna say something else. Oh, it's just interesting because as we stopped trying to make the romantic portion of our relationship work because there was a disconnect, it's interesting as we've both dated and tried dating, that's probably a better phrase. There's we're realizing that when we date within our authenticity, there's certain things that just weren't there for us when we were trying to have a romantic relationship and make it fit into what we thought it should be. And there was one point
Because it's good to mention that neither of us ever really dated anyone else seriously,
I had
at all.
4 girlfriends before her, but that
I'm
wasn't
shaking my head.
most of those were like, "Let's date for a weekend," and then this was too serious. And
Yeah.
she's never dated anyone else, she's never kissed anyone else, and
And it's been an adventure.
yeah, it's kind of fun because like, we'll go on a date and then call each other on the way home and be
Pretty
like,
much every time.
"Okay, help me process
Really,
this,"
it's
and
a best friend, but it's more because we know each other so well. No one knows me as well as he does, the good parts, the bad parts, the parts that I need help with, the parts that I'm strong. He knows all that more than even anyone in my family, like my original family, just because we've had so much experience together, and that's a gift.
I think going back to, like, advice, when people are trying to pick sides, like, if it's my family, not that my family has, but if it's someone
No.
on my side that's like, having feelings against her or vice versa, it's like, well, trust me as the person, like trust Sarah. Sarah knows me better than anyone. If she says that she still wants me in her life and still wants, to love and care about each other, trust her and just follow her lead. And that's probably like, I think she alluded to that,
With any
earlier.
divorce.
With any divorce, follow the lead of the person there, you know? There was a situation recently where something happened and I called someone and I said, okay, this thing's happening, how are we playing it? Because you're closer to this person than I am. I trust you completely. I know you know this person really well. How do I come at it? And she's like completely supportive. And I'm like, great, I'm all on board. Let's go. Let's be that for them. And so just even asking, like, how can I support you? And how can I support the other part of the relationship as well?
And it's
Having that
hard to not
communication.
assume that you know better than whoever it is you're trying to support. And sometimes people do see things like, especially in an abusive relationship or something, when if all of your supporters are telling you, hey, this isn't good for you, maybe you need to listen. But also, like, the person who's in it is the only one that can really make the decisions, right? And we ran into that when we were finally deciding to try thinking about getting divorced, to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and kind of feel it out, make sure we gave ourselves time to not make a big mistake. Um, and he was even then worried about how people were going to view him because he would come out as the villain in that. And I'm like, I don't care. They haven't been here. They haven't been crying on the floor with us trying to figure it out. Like, their opinion doesn't matter.
I think the exact word she uses, they don't get to have an opinion. That's not their right to do so, you know? And I think even in a not so ideal, like, not that our situation was ideal, but, like, we're trying to maintain a
As
good
far as
relationship.
gay
If
straight divorce goes, it's
other
pretty ideal.
couples
Like,
Yeah. Without mentioning any details, I had someone I care about who was going through a divorce, and they were trying to tell their family, like, some of the not so great things that had happened, and they didn't believe them,
mm,
you know, until someone else witnessed it. And then they're like, oh, we believe this person, so we're here to
that's
support
rough.
you. And I think it's true both ways. You know, if someone that you care about is telling you their situation, just believe them. You know, we try to fit it into our framework and make it make sense for us and how we view things, but just believe that they're doing the best they can in their situation and support them.
I don't know about you. I've had that question a lot. Well, in the first year or so, when people found out that he was gay before or after we were getting divorced, they're like, how did you not know? Like, how did you really didn't know? And I think that's mostly coming from a, a fear standpoint. It's like,
What am I
wow,
missing?
if you didn't know that in like 19 years of marriage, like what, yeah, what do I not know? How can I protect myself against what has happened to you? And the answer is you can't. I think the only thing that you can really do ever in a relationship is do your very best to be kind, do your very best to assume the best of your partner and talk to each other. You've got to communicate. Because if people feel safe with you, if they feel like you're on the same team, there's not, those secrets, whatever they may or may not be. Lots of people don't have them, hopefully, but can come out in a more productive way and in a safer way, in a way that doesn't make everything fall apart. Because that's what he was always worried about. And in some ways it did, but in some ways it didn't.
And in my journey, you know, like, how did she not know? Well, I didn't fully know. Like, I knew I was struggling with something, but I didn't really know what it meant, you know? And I kind of just kept assuming that if I found the right combination of repentance and therapy and support, that I
And
could
never
make it
letting
go
anybody
away.
know.
Yeah.
But even therapy, he was in therapy for 10 years, but he never told his therapist that that's what he was struggling with. He was too afraid of it coming out.
I saw a new doctor a couple years ago as this before I was able to accept. She knew that I was struggling with this, and hadn't said the word gay out loud in reference to myself, any of this, since I remember sitting down with this doctor. And he was asking me some things about where I was for the health problems, mental health stuff I was struggling with. And he's like, "Is there anything else
Hmm.
you want to share?" And I said, he was taking copious notes, and I said, "Yes, but don't write it down." Um, and it's just like,
This was after you had come out to me too and a few other
yeah,
people.
but there was so much, like, I didn't even want to talk about it in therapy because what if someone read those notes? What if, like, some court case happened and those were like so many different things of like, I didn't want anyone to know this about me because of how I felt about it. And that's the thing, is like, people are like, it's been a couple years, like, you should be fine by now. I'm like, you don't realize how much structure I put in place and how much fear I lived in.
To
It's
protect.
gonna take a while to redo that. You know, little things happen all the time. Like, I bought one of the toys I bought was a cute little, like, character, and I remember it was from a pic, like a short movie, a little animated thing,
Oh, yeah.
and it was a rainbow thing. And I remember at the time kind of being offended by it when it came out. Of like, it's just pushing the gay agenda. You know, it was showing like two men, as they weren't even men, you know,
Dancing joyfully.
dancing and happy and rainbows all around. And so I thought it was ironic. I bought it later. I was like, yeah, that was so funny. And then
Mhm.
I showed Sarah and I was telling her, I was like, the funny thing is, and I said it, and she looks at me and she's like, your poor little brain. And I just burst into tears, just knowing and remembering like how much I tried to make it all fit and how much fear I lived in. And so it's such a journey to try to process all that and figure out how to do life without that. But I'm glad and very, very grateful that I still have Sarah's support. From the moment I told her, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," the first thing she said was, "I'm sorry you've had to carry that so long by yourself." And she still shows up supportive. She doesn't always understand me, but that's always been our case. I don't understand her, and she doesn't understand me all the time, but we
Mhm.
try. And that's kind of where I think that's the important part is that we just continually try to understand each other. And even though I don't like dogs, I understand why they matter to her, you know?
I think in all of this, whether you are the one maybe considering needing to go through divorce or you're the one trying to support someone who is, I think, I don't even remember where it came from, but the thing, approaching people with curiosity, not with judgment, is so important because then your mind is so much more open to possible outcomes, possible. If we had just approached this, I mean, I guess we had to approach this with curiosity because there's not a lot of, there's very few prototypes to look at and say, well, that's how you do it. Because even the people that have gone through it, they've handled it so many different ways. I think it's valuable though to consider all of the possibilities and to see how could this work out and what do we need to do to make it work out in the way that we want it to have the relationship we need. And I've even seen straight couples who usually, I mean, if he was straight, I don't think we would have ever divorced. We're too good of friends, we care about each other too much, we've made these commitments to each other. But I've seen straight couples that did get divorced and they did it for reasons that would maybe make them not be able to be friends, and I've seen them decide to create that relationship where they can at least be civil, and sometimes they can be friends because it's so much healthier for the kids and for them if there's not like abuse or other things happening. But it's just the curiosity and the keeping your mind open about how could this turn out and how do we want it to turn out and what can we do about it. It's don't let it happen to you, right? Act, not be acted upon.
It took we've taken most of our kids just to therapy kind of proactively, of like, hey, let's
Just a
get
little
you to
bit.
talk to someone else other than just us. And one of them, the therapist was asking, like, what do you want to focus on? And they didn't have a lot to add. And I was like, well, I would be curious if they want to talk through how they've done with the divorce and stuff. And the kid was like, 60% of parents get divorced. I have lots of kids, friends
Which
with
is
divorced
sad,
parents.
but I
Like,
guess a healthy
it's normal,
viewpoint.
and just it was like as I say that, I say that because like divorce is really common. Doesn't mean we have to like de-importanize. Is that a word?
It
No.
is.
De-emphasize marriage because marriage is important and making commitments and sticking with
Super
commitments is
important.
important. But
Totally believe in it.
it's also like again, we got divorced and still care about each other. There's still parts of our commitments that we're keeping to each other. And so just being able to like normalize it in a way and just understand that it's happening and we
We had
should show up
another
and love and
kid that
support people.
we asked if they wanted to go to therapy and, with all the divorce stuff, and they're like, "Well, actually, I'm okay with all that, but I do have some other things I'd like to talk to them about." We're like, "Okay, then." Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you were hoping we would maybe cover? I know our time is gone.
Just, there's a lot of people that want to give you a hug through their headphones
We
and
would both cry.
I've right now you're giving both of each other a big hug. We should have this on video, but just the dynamics between the two of you not talking over each other, the love you have for each other, respect, you're a beautiful couple and walking a really unique road. Here's some things I wrote down, listeners, that I learned from Sarah and Jeremy. Is I love this. I've got like them numbered 1 through 9. I'll try to go pretty fast. We sometimes label things like one you didn't say, but I've heard is you're ruining an eternal family if you choose to get divorced. And you've obviously heard that one. And I hope we don't do that. I hope we just follow the advice of Sarah and Jeremy and not sort of project whatever we want to project on a couple.
On
Um,
that, we have
Go
to
ahead.
trust, right? I just on that, I mean, and that's figured into it, but we just have to trust ourselves and trust God, I think, and do our very best to treat each other as He would and expect that whatever needs to work out is going to.
And so maybe there is an eternal family here, and through the lens of a divorce and not being, we sometimes maybe pre-conclude that an eternal family is blown up in front of our eyes. I'm being dramatic.
Mhm.
But then you look at you two and you hear your story and your love for each other. And I just think it's for the rest of us, let's just not try to go down that road and do what we can support you. And to your point, Sarah, leave it all at the hands of our Savior. We don't know a lot about the next life. We don't know how that works. And so who know, I think we just leave that in the hands of God and try to love you. I love you mentioning betrayal trauma, and that can be a journey for people when they learn betrayal trauma. Do either one of you want to just define that for our listeners?
Betrayal trauma, I'm guessing that it's like just the act of being betrayed by someone you trust so much. It can probably make you be really leery of trusting anything again, and it can cause a lot of heartache and questioning yourself and questioning your ability to make good decisions maybe, and questioning everything. Is
And
there
it
something else you're thinking about there?
that great answer. And I think one of the things you've inferred is you guys have been true and faithfully to each other, but there may have been some betrayal trauma you felt because Jeremy didn't tell you he was gay for a couple decades. And how did you work through that? Because it sounds like
I
Jeremy
don't
sort of saying it was hard for me to even figure that out, but
Right. I
it
don't think
was
I
a
had any of
secret.
that,
It was
actually.
what's that?
I don't think I had any of that actually,
Good.
because I don't think he was betraying me. Like, I don't, like I said, it's not like he went into our marriage knowing he was gay and intending to just try to hide it from me. I think we both know that we went in with pure intentions and meaning the promises that we meant. And just knowing him as a person helps with that, knowing his general character and how much integrity he has. I knew that that wasn't the case. And and I've said this to lots of people, it might have been a different story if he had decided to explore it in different ways and cheat on me and hide stuff from me, because I don't think that I could trust him and have as much love, and there would have been more betrayal there, but he never did that. He cared too much about me, and he cared too much about not hurting us to let that happen. And so that speaks a lot for his character. And but I mean, that happens sometimes, and people still can work through it and can still have a good relationship after. I've known a couple of couples who there has been some betrayal and a little bit of cheating beforehand when they were trying to hold it all in, and it got out in unhealthy ways, you know? And I think that they can work through it too, but I'm really grateful that that's not one of the things I've had to work through with him. I just appreciate it.
I was gonna add, like, I feel like the question came to mind of how could he do this to me? And I think is there's like clinical betrayal trauma with like actual betrayal, and then there's I think a lot of times in life we view things through that lens. How could they do this to me? And it's like, well, they weren't doing it to you. And that's one of the things she never came at it with that attitude of how could Jeremy do this to me? She came at it with a what's he going through and how can I support and how can we figure out what to do, and
Yeah.
that's really been helpful. There's other
Mhm.
places in life I've experienced betrayal trauma, but not with Sarah.
And
Great.
some of that was even just, I mean, he didn't betray me. He didn't choose to betray me. He chose to not betray me. He chose to try for so long. And that has to count for something.
I wrote down in big capital letters, listening to both of you, the word grace.
Mm,
Just what a beautiful example of grace. And there's anger and pain. It's easy to project that on each other, but it's another thing to sort of try to see the bigger picture here. And so that's just beautiful. I love this thing that you said. Well, of course you're going to get divorced. Of way back in the beginning, of course you're going to stay together. I've been guilty of that. It's not really a statement of curiosity, to your point. It's a statement of I'm projecting, and I just love that we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't project somebody's path to them. We should just, ask open-ended questions, be curious, trust them to figure out their future, and we become a safer person if we project our path for you. Then you may not open up to me because I already know your expectation for me, and if I can't meet that, I'm not going to open up to you as a safe person to sort of talk about the realities of my life. So I've been guilty of that, listeners. But I think just an invitation just to love people, stay curious, and self-determination as a principle a therapist taught me is just this principle, which I think is our theology. Let couples self-determine, let individuals self-determine. and stay out of the of course you're going to, and whatever words we're going to put next to that. I love this line I wrote down. We went to this instead of, we're going to make this a 50-50 sort of financial legal split. We're going through the lens of what's best for the kids. And that's going to be the lens we're approaching this. And I love that you went slow and you didn't just say, well, this was a slow process. There's no rush to get divorced. There's no, and
It's a
so
big mistake to make if it's not going to be the right thing.
so I just thought and there's no owner's manual. I think both of you talked about that. So there's just very little direction, support. Therapists can be good, but but I love that you just said, we're going to try to do what's best for the kids. I love just the line, advice. It's easy for us to give advice. It's harder to give, to listen. Elder Renlund's got a book out, I noticed, about listening. We haven't had a lot of content at the church. We have a lot of content how to be good teachers. I think another really beautiful Christ-like attribute is the ability to listen and ask open-ended questions. Don't flip the conversation to somebody else going through something else or our own divorce in this situation. Just be present and try to listen. You said this, Sara, at Arizona at Gather, and you said it again on the podcast, and it hit me like my prayer is that I will say it again. I will love, I won't fall in, I say it again.
I prayed to be able to love Jeremy and not be in love with him.
Wow.
And it worked. I'm not in love with him at all. Like, our relationship is not romantic in any way. And that's really freeing too, because it can't really be that way, right? But I don't think I could have made that change myself. I did need help for that.
When did you first put that phrase in your brain and sort of separate those two words of love the way you just did in a really powerful way?
Probably when we when we decided that we were going to try to get divorced.
I feel like she's been on a journey. She's always loved me. When we first started dating, we were 18 and 19, and then I went on a mission and she went to BYU and she was trying to not love me because what if it didn't work out, And so
Actually, I remember praying a lot. I'm like, if this isn't going to work out, please help me to stop caring about him because this is painful. And I never stopped. So apparently it was supposed to work out. We don't think that we made a mistake getting married, even knowing that it wasn't the most natural thing for him. It's still, there's been so many good things that have come from it. It's not like we're like, if only we hadn't gotten married, we wouldn't have gone through this pain. True, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I don't think.
my life and my journey, it's always feeling loved and knowing I'm loved has always been something that's really hard. Like love became in my brain transactional and like things like that. And she's felt very spiritually prompted at many times that part of her purpose is to help me feel loved, and that's, I think, the basis. And she's that kind of person. Like, even if I complain about a driver, sometimes she's like, well, what about, she's like trying to love and
I
support
get that from my mom.
most.
She's
Like,
very kind.
gives people the benefit of the doubt. She's loving and kind. She'll give them a side eye or glare at them, or I disagree with how you said that, but she's always does it with love. Like, that's just who she is as a human.
I remember it was kind of startling once when, just not that long ago, just a couple years ago, when he kind of came to the realization that with my family, my siblings and stuff, like, we don't always communicate the best. Sometimes we don't see each other for a while, but he's like, what is it? What is it that you said?
She was just talking about their relationships, and I said, wait, like, you just always know that they love you? Like, that's just a given for you, like, that you just know and you never question that. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, I don't think I've ever felt that. Like, my brain, and part of that's like what I've gone through. I had my older brother, I have a picture of him back there. He died when I was like 18, 19 months old. And so, like, loss has been a part of my life. And everyone in my life became a different person after that. And so, like,
Everyone was
love
so
was just
stupid to leave.
complicated. And yeah, people would leave, and Josh left, and all these other things happened, and so my brain just was
That
always
trauma.
looking for when it would go away, always looking for when people would decide they're done with me and move on, you know.
And in my family, we'd disagree and we'd have this and that, but like it's never, the relationship has always been more important than whatever it is we're dealing with. And sometimes we have big differences of opinion, but we're able to respect each other. And I had that even modeled my mom's family. Most of all of her brothers were not active as adults. And even though the rest of the family was very active and the church was very important to them, they never treated them as anything less than their brothers. And they loved them and they had such a great relationship. And I think that that was a really good template for how I've viewed family and people who I love. So it's never been something I've wondered or felt like I had to earn. And he's never had that.
I've never felt that. I wanted to say that, like, I know people that
Right.
have
You've never
loved
had that
me,
feeling.
but I've never had that feeling. So I don't want to be like, people
No,
didn't love me,
no,
you know,
no.
like, especially if a family member's
No,
listening,
of
be like,
course
I
not.
always
Of
loved
course
you.
not.
It's
No,
like,
it's
oh,
just you never
I feel
realize
that
that that's
internally.
how it could be for you too.
Right.
There's a lot of ability to see things from each other's perspective in both of your stories. It's a beautiful part of your relationship. I love that you separated romantic love from love, other types of love.
Our
And
culture is very focused on romantic love.
and you just sort of frame that that's not possible for us, but all these other categories of love are possible for us and part of our relationship. And I thought that was just really terrific. I also like that you said our marriage wasn't a mistake. We're glad we were married, and we have this beautiful family and this beautiful relationship, and I believe that. That leads me to my next comment. I sometimes think of Apollo 13 listeners, you listeners that listen a lot,
That movie.
and I talk about Gene Kratz, if I'm saying his name right, the mission commander in Houston, and pretty dynamic personality, and everything's going sideways. Apollo 13 is not going to the moon,
Mhm.
which maybe represent your marriage not surviving. And they're just trying to get Apollo 13 back to Earth. And everybody's pretty discouraged. And he stands up and says, "Excuse me, this is going to be our finest hour."
Mm.
And in some ways, maybe the last 2 years have been your finest hour as a couple. And a really difficult hour, but maybe your finest hour. And then I thought of your kids. And And I thought of the positive lessons they are learning from both of you about honesty, about communication, about love, about integrity, about being authentic. I assume they can open up to you about the realities of their lives because you've been open about what's going on in your lives. And I would just think some of the lessons that are happening in your family will be seen for generations to come in a positive way. You've got these 5 kids, you got a kid on a mission. That this experience has probably helped him understand people better and reach people better and know that and help him communicate that God loves all of his children. You and your podcast episode 761, when we put that out, I put a caption on that podcast, listeners, that said, "This podcast mentions suicide. If you are suicidal, please call, text, chat 988," because you were open about suicide being part of your journey. And that would have been a very different story if we'd lost you to suicide. And part of your journey in that story, as you know well, Jeremy, is just your need to come out, to be able to get into a better emotional spot so you could be the companion you are to your wife and the father and the provider. And so I don't look at, you coming out and your story as anywhere as anything but a beautiful authentic journey to better support the people that are dependent on you in your life. And I don't look at divorce as a failure, obviously. Um, so anyway, I love Apollo 13, and I don't know if you like that analogy or not, but I just think if your kids could come on the podcast in 10 or 20 years and talk about this
How it went for them.
experience, they would frame this as a pretty positive experience for them and has given them tools to navigate complexity in their life and role model open, vulnerable, real communication, which is something you've talked about that's come more into your, I keep using the M word marriage, but I'm using the R word relationship, has come into your relationship. So any more comments on that?
I was obsessed with the Apollo 13 soundtrack as a kid, so I love that. You definitely made us both cry because you know, I think that's such a great example because it was this mission to the moon, and then it became more about keeping three humans alive and getting them back home to their families, you know. And as much as like our journey started as this is our goal to have X, Y, or Z, we have to adapt as life throws things there. And I was worried for many years about how would this affect my kids and stuff. And I think I've kind of realized more, like you were saying, that my kids will learn empathy. They'll learn to love and accept people as they are. They'll learn a lot of good things because we're open. And it has been, I think, very helpful for most of the relationships with the kids to be one, to be here, and two, to be authentically myself.
And really, that's how we ended up making the decision to get divorced. Is I was willing to lose him as a husband, but I wasn't willing to lose him completely. That could have happened if we had kept trying to force ourselves into what we thought we needed to do.
We should have video on.
No, we should not.
Then I've got just a couple quick numbers here. I love that you talked about separated values from beliefs. Andy Newman came on the podcast. They're a straight couple. He's left the church. He's an ex-Mormon therapist, and he talked about how to keep his marriage together, which is easier because there's romantic love. But he said one of the things that helped is they wrote down all their values that haven't changed since their beliefs changed. And that was really helpful for them as a couple because they did want to stay together. And I don't want to make their story your story and such and stuff, but the principle of values was really helpful for me just to listen to a couple in a mixed faith marriage sort of navigate that, realize their beliefs are way different, but their values are very similar and allowed them to stay together. In a way, that's the motto you're using to stay together. I still calling you stay together in a relationship.
Oh, pretty together.
And then I loved you giving permission, Sarah, and maybe Jeremy did this too, that if you're in an abusive situation, if there's infidelity, if there's a pattern of just a list of stuff we could talk about that's not healthy for a marriage, that's different story than our story. But you even gave a little grace there that maybe you can work through that. So every story is a little different, and we would all invite, if you're in an abusive, toxic situation, you've got to get out of that. The law of love, all the things we've talked about. If you're in the middle of an abusive, sexual, emotional situation, the general feeling is you've got to get out of that or fully address that. And if your partner's not willing to address that or accept that or see that, then that is not a healthy relationship. And generally, especially if there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, that's a relationship you've got to get out of, whether that's a marriage or any other kind of situation. Any of that you want to cycle back to or anything else you want to share?
Just kind of what I said before, that what makes what we have now work is that we've, through the entire thing, been able to be unselfish and to care about each other as much or more than we care about ourselves. And that's the only way. I mean, in a marriage, out of a marriage, in any relationship, if you're making decisions based on you wanting the other person to be okay, and not like at expense of your own self, right? That you have to take care of yourself, obviously, but we don't make decisions based on what do I want the most or what is best just for me. We're still making those decisions based on what is best for both of us because it affects us if one of us isn't doing well. We still have that close of a relationship as you would with any really close friend or family member. And so that's why it works. And if that's not happening, if you're the only one who cares about the other person enough to be unselfish, then that's why all of the abuse and all of the other things that sometimes you can't work through them because you can't trust that person to put your interests not first maybe, but like at a high level, you know.
I think I'd echo that. And like, if you're in an unsafe situation, get in a safer place.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of people I've chatted with in my journey that have gotten divorced, and it's not just the right decision because it's good for them, but it's like it's
Necessary.
safety, and you are, even if people don't see it, and that's one of the challenges with like abusive relationships. is when someone's like, hey, I'm in an abusive relationship and people don't believe them. That is more traumatic than the abuse for some people.
Said you
And
feel
it
like you can't
really
trust anyone to care about
creates
you.
big problems. Yeah. And so if you're in that situation, find people that will believe you and find safe places, because it's a whole different
Yeah,
journey.
not even the same wheelhouse.
Yeah.
What are you going to do if you fall in love with the same guy?
That'll work out really well, I guess.
We have different taste in men, so
We have, though,
You
talked
joked about this at the beginning of the podcast, so I thought
That's
I'd
your favorite joke.
circle back to that.
What we have talked about, though, is how, at least for me, my relationship with him, though it's not romantic, is more important to me than any new relationship that could come into my life. I think I asked him once, well, what if whoever you're dating isn't okay with us being close and being as involved as we are?
And I said, well, I won't date them. Like that's,
Great.
if someone's going to be jealous in a purely platonic friendship, I feel like too often we're taught that once you get married, that's your only person. That's everything. And
And it
you
can be that way
abandon a
maybe
lot of
early in
people.
life. Oh, yeah, that's true.
You pull away from
Doesn't-
friends, you pull away from family, you just do that. It's like I'm not looking for that at this stage in my life. I'm looking for someone to support
and
me
it's
and
not
I
even
can support
healthy
them.
earlier.
And if they won't support me in supporting the mother of my children, this wonderful human, and my kids, I've talked to friends who came out and married a man who wasn't supportive of their kids and their ex-wife, and it didn't work out well. It created dissonance. So honestly, it's actually a little bit of a litmus test and a good thing. If if guys are like, oh, you have kids, I don't
You're
want to date
close
you.
with your ex-wife. That's
Bye.
weird.
Have a great day. Like I don't have to waste my time with that. if
Where
that
I
makes
think
sense.
we hopefully have approached it is eventually, if we did find new partners, that it would be someone who would just be more part of our family.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things when our divorce and the day we decided, there was just such a feeling of like, we're not dividing our family, we're opening it up and expanding it. And if I find someone that loves and supports me authentically, and I get to love and support fully authentically, and she does too, then there's four parents for the kids. There's more support versus less.
I love that you've had this conversation. I didn't think about this
We've had
part
all
of
the
your
conversations.
story. I love that you've had all the conversations about the future, and you're walking this road together, trying to find back to the values you want, a value that your future partners, if you find future partners, will love your current partner, this platonic relationship and the family. And I think the other thing you've role modeled really well is going slow. And sometimes people want to push you really quick to do things and get on with a new relationship, thinking that'll make everything better. I just love that you kind of drown out those voices a little bit, all the voices in your life that are sort of projectioning on what you should do, and really owning your own moral authority and using um, each other and you're such good friends with to really figure out the next chapters in your story. And you've role modeled that so well. Just a great example of continuing to do that. Anything else in closing?
I don't think
I
so.
think we've said plenty.
We've
Just
we went way over the 45 minutes, but
well,
we
you
appreciate you giving us this spot, like being able to talk through some of this and share. Again, it's not prescriptive. Our journey is not anybody else's, but we just hope people feel like seen in their journey if they're trying to do something similar, or feel maybe they glean something from us that might help them. Because early on in my journey, listening to other people's stories and hearing was so vital, and just
The
being able
only
to see,
yeah.
yeah, and even connecting. There are divorced couples who are doing it well in situations and are still friends. There's a couple I follow. She lives with her husband and her ex-husband. I've got a friend here in town. Her ex-husband's gay. Her new husband's not, thankfully. But they live together and
Sounds
they're
really nice.
raising their son together, and like
Think about like a duplex or something, or like
if I win the lottery, we'll buy a big house and I can have my wing, she can have hers. But like just, hearing those journeys helped us. So we hope it helps other people as well.
you both give each other a lot of hope, and give I was going to say, and our listeners, just that there's hope at the and for everybody navigating tough stuff, the things you've shared, I think, regardless of our journey, give us hope. So thank you so much for both of you. Sarah, do you have any last words too?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm good.
Well, thank you,
On doing
Sara
the thing.
Kerrigan and Jeremy Kerrigan, and all of our listeners for listening and sharing these brave episodes of awesome people that come on and vulnerably share their stories. So this is Richard, also your host, signing off of another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.